Hello, Greta.
Hi, it's great to be here.
So fun to chat with you. So we're both kind of local. We
Yeah,
both live
we
in
are.
Southern California. And we were talking about other things we have in common. We both have 4 kids, and we are both launching our first books in the middle of a pandemic.
Congratulations.
Yay!
Enjoy the ride.
I know, right? And you have been, on Instagram for a long time. I have followed you for years. I love your account. It's a fun mix of parenting and home design, which is like dinging all my boxes of things I love.
Yeah, well, I tried to have like separate accounts like at the very beginning, and then I was like, this is too much. This is just put it all out in one place and
Yeah.
follow along for the ride.
But I actually think that that's really appealing for people to be able to
I do
see
too.
kind of all those different facets. Like I follow a lot of home design accounts, and I always like to get a peek at their family or.
Yeah, I do too. And I think it just makes it makes it real because you're like, oh,
Yeah.
that's how you really live in that place. And that's what you
Yeah.
do with your
Yes.
whole life.
Yes.
So,
Yes. I know, because it's one thing to see a bunch of austere, home design photos, but then to see how children actually live in the space, I think
right.
is interesting.
Yes. Yes. The Legos
Yeah.
and the fingerprints on the
Hmm.
walls and just,
Yeah.
the, the dip in the sofa where they always sit. Like,
Yes.
that's real life.
It's real life. Absolutely. Well, we are both going to read a little section of our books, and then we're just going to chat. And so, do you want to go first?
Sure. Um, do you want me to just dive in or
No,
do
tell
you
us
have
about your
any
book.
specific?
Tell
Okay.
us about your book. Yeah.
So it's called, I'm sorry, can you hear my next door neighbor who just decided to turn on his motorcycle?
Just a tiny
Is
bit. It's
it?
okay, though.
Okay, it's all right. I'm sorry. It's just
We have those neighbors
this,
too.
again, this is real life.
Real life.
Okay, so hopefully he's moving. All right, my book is called Adventuring Together, and it is about connecting with your kids through adventure because building relationship is a passion of mine, and doing it in a way that lights me up, which is adventure. That's a passion of mine as well, because of course, if I'm not excited about it, it's going to be harder for me to make it happen. So I talk a little bit in the book about how we can sort of set aside our busy schedule and all of our obligations and make space for adventure, and that sometimes that comes with the desire to step back from all of our busy schedule and all the things we think we have to do and we're
Hmm.
supposed to do as parents in the modern day world,
Yeah.
and being kind of brave and saying, you know what, I maybe we're going to do it a little different and we're going to carve our own path,
Hmm.
and what that looks like and then what the benefits are. So that's
Yeah.
part that I'm going to share with you guys.
Love that.
All right, let's go. This is the first time I've read from my book. This is kind of fun and weird. All right.
Totally weird.
Can you tell that I'm a first time author? Like, I'm geeking out about this.
Me too.
All right,
Right there with
let's
you.
go. All right. Our kids are not the only ones who are busy and distracted in this day and age. Parents are too. Most of us deal with a combination of busy schedules and the siren call of technology every day. So we all have to be more diligent about carving out consistent time for adventure with our kids because connections aren't created by accident. Whether you are able to adventure together every week or every month, the thing that matters is that the adventures continue to happen again and again. Consistency builds a familiarity and a comfort with both the adventuring and the time spent together, and it also creates a longing for more adventures to come. But oftentimes we fill up our schedule with things like soccer and football practice, um, weeknights and weekends filled with games. Our days and our nights are so full and busy. We're together, yet not. Our kids are spending more time connecting and making memories with kids on their team or their classes than with their families. And I know it's counterculture to say so, but maybe it's time we stepped back and made building connections with our families our number one priority. Sometimes when people hear we choose connection over activities, they question us about wasted time. But just because the outcome of adventure is not measurable does not mean it's wasted time. There are no trophies or award ceremonies. It's true. And you might not see the positive outcomes of your adventures for years to come, but that isn't why we're doing this. We're chasing adventure with our kids to build relationship for the years ahead.
I love that so much, and it's been so fun chatting with other authors and finding these places of overlap in our books, and to hear from yours because I feel the same way and wrote about something very similar. So this is from my book, Raging It's Minivan, and this is in a chapter called Opting Out. And the chapter is about exactly what you're talking about, which is the fact that in order to have the connection that I want with my family and have the space for those connecting moments, we've had to opt out of other things.
Yeah.
And some of those things are things that are sort of sacred cows in parenting, you know, that we need to be overscheduled, that the kids need to be in certain activities that, and I love that you said that you're like wasting your time if they're not like being pushed into
Yeah.
activity, and that's been a struggle for me too. I mean, even me personally, it's been a
Yeah.
struggle
Me too.
because I'm an Enneagram 3. Do you do the Enneagram at all?
I'm a 7.
Oh,
So
okay. Well,
that's why
that fits for
adventure
you.
makes
Yes.
sense, but also like say yes to everything.
Yes, totally. Well, see, I'm having to push against even my personality because I'm an Enneagram 3, and so it's like perform and do the things.
Yes,
And so I've had
exactly.
to really pull back
Yeah,
and rein it in my own self, but with my kids.
right.
But this is from that chapter, Opting Out. So one of the things I've opted out of is my kids excelling at anything,
Mm.
which is a joke. My kids aren't insanely good at anything, but they're exceedingly average at a number of things, maybe even above average, but none of them are prodigies, and I'm okay with it. When children are small, doing everything perfectly tends to center around domesticity, making homemade baby food, doing the most with crafts, having a perfectly kept home. But when kids get older, it becomes about activities, sports, performing arts, orchestra, pick your poison. But there is a ton of pressure to figure out the thing your kid is going to do well and then make them amazing at it at an age well before they really have the agency to choose their own passions. I value seasons of time without my kids in many activities. We've had seasons of sports playoffs and intense theater tech weeks, the harried evenings, the dinners eaten in the car or on the field. With 4 kids in all different activities, life can quickly be sabotaged by nightly practices or rehearsals or weekend games and shows. I've throttled it all back and I'm loving it. We can eat dinner together every night and it isn't from a drive-thru. We have time for homework. We have time to just sit around and talk or play a game. We are not stressed or overscheduled. I know there is a lot to be learned from group sports or lessons, but I also think there is a lot to be learned from being present in an unharried season of family life. Learning how to just be, learning how to value slow dinners and long conversations and really connecting and being vulnerable with your family. I want my kids to explore their passions, and we will certainly have seasons where activities and sports will ramp up. But I'm compelled to push back against the cultural norm of sports over family life. It's been really beautiful to have a season where our family time is a priority.
Man, I love that. That's so good.
But it's hard,
It is hard to do. It
right?
is.
It's
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. Because we're all supposed to be like the tiger mom and have like
Right.
tiger
Right.
cubs that are
Yes.
like you said, that they all excel.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of parents, maybe we aren't even fully aware of how much, what our children's success, how much their success feeds our pride even,
Yeah.
and how we
Yeah.
fit in and
Yeah.
how a measure of our success as parents.
Yes. I think there's a lot to that. And I have struggled with that very pride because I think, yeah, we do kind of tend to, if we're not careful, see our kids as little extensions of
Mm-hmm.
ourselves.
Right.
And I had the experience of, I was a good student in school. I was a good student in grad school. I was good at my job. And you had grades or performance reviews where you got your gold stars and your pat on the back.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have kids, and there's that temptation to look for the gold stars through them because that's what you're
Right.
doing, right? You're a
Right.
mom. So how do I get the gold stars now in my life as a mom? And it's like, make them perform. Make them my
Right.
walking resume.
Right. Like I remember even when I had little babies, it was like if your kid slept through the night at like, 2 months, you were like the best mom ever. And
Oh
it's like,
yeah.
and if you had a kid who was 2 and still not sleeping through the night, I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. And it's like, well, gosh, I'm not like fully in charge. He is his own human. Like I
Yes.
can't control whether he sleeps through the night or not. Every kid's different, but there's just a lot of pressure for our kids to excel at things and be great at things, even like sleeping, which is
Yes.
crazy.
You're so right. And sleeping, and then we move to like, are they reading yet? And do they know their numbers? And
Yeah.
are they early? And I remember, because I have 4 kids, and it's like you end up parenting the fourth different than the first, right?
Definitely.
And I remember by my fourth, I'm like, they're gonna learn to read. They're gonna learn to read. Like I don't want to spend a bunch of time guiding a 3 or 4 year old to read early. Like
Right.
they will learn to read. And
Yeah.
I want to promote a love of reading, but like let it just happen on its own time. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. And if it doesn't, because I have a child who's has severe dyslexia,
Mhm.
then you'll notice the difference because it eventually doesn't happen. And
Yes.
so, I mean, I had like the full range. The kid who had no issues and read it didn't learn to read till he was 8.
Mhm.
The child who taught herself to read at 6, praise God, I didn't have to do a thing.
Mhm.
Uh, and then a kid who's dyslexic and needed help. And now I have my almost 9-year-old who's kind of doesn't really care about reading yet. And I'm just like, well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. That is so true too. Each kid is on their own timeline. I have that. I have a pretty big span in that as well, in terms of, academic interest and ability. And
Mm-hmm.
each kid is going to be their
Yeah.
own. And I think there's pressure for sports, but then there's that pressure that kids all have to be academic too and meet a certain measure,
Yeah.
that I feel like I've had to push back against a little too, especially with kids with, different learning needs.
Right. And I think that that's one of the things that's so great when you step aside from anything that has like awards or achievements attached to them and you're just enjoying the time together,
Yeah.
then you can erase all of that pressure to
Yeah.
perform and you can just simply enjoy connecting and
Yeah.
relationship building and just breathe.
Yes. Yeah. And it's been interesting, I feel like during the pandemic, everyone was sort of forced into this slow,
Mm-hmm.
everyone had to pull back. I mean, sports all took a break and
Yeah.
school took a break. And um, I felt like that was an interesting experience for everyone to really take a step back and go, do we need to be this overscheduled? And is there maybe something lovely about having more time as a family for connecting?
Yeah, and I think like just learning new ways of living life when you've just been told from the get-go this is how you do it.
Yeah.
And then when all of that is gone, then you're like, "Oh, okay, well, maybe we can do things differently. We have to right now, so it's an experiment." And
Yeah.
then you kind of find things that you really like.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's funny because I've always been, you're a homeschooling mom, and I've always said, oh, I could never homeschool. I'm too introverted. I need to, I work, I have to focus. And then, now that we've kind of been doing not homeschooling, but distance learning at home, I'm like, I kind of like it.
Yeah, there are, I mean, obviously I've chosen to do this, so I like it. And but there definitely are benefits that I think some people didn't realize. Like for
Yeah.
example, I love slow mornings. Like
Mm-hmm.
I love not having to rush out the door to get to
Yeah.
school. And we've homeschooled the whole time. So that's never really been our life, except for like one, in the summer, like we might have a week where they're going to, an art camp for a week or
Mm-hmm.
something. And like 1 week of getting up early every day, packing lunches and getting out the door. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I
It's kind
can't
of
do it
awful.
anymore.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming. So like, that's a benefit that I think some people didn't even realize. Like you can just take it slow in the morning and let kids sleep in or make their own breakfast. You don't have to
Yeah.
rush around.
Yeah.
That's really nice.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, a lot of, I mean, most parents over the last few months ended up distance learning with their kids, having their kids doing school at home. And what's different about homeschooling, which is what you do, versus distance learning, which a lot of us were sort of thrust into? Like, because I know I've heard a lot of friends of mine who homeschool kind of reminding, like, what you're doing is not homeschooling. Like, what you're doing is different.
Right. Well, I think there's a few different things. For one, when you homeschool, you have a say in what your kids are learning.
Mm-hmm.
You're the curriculum designer. You
Mm-hmm.
pick the books. You pick the assignments. So you get to be more involved in that process. You know what excites them and what interests them, what excites and interests you.
Mm-hmm.
So, so that's a huge part of it. You get to create the curriculum and the learning schedule. So that I think is fun and you're more invested.
Mm-hmm.
And your child might be more invested as well. Secondly, it's a lot less computer time.
Mm-hmm.
When you're homeschooling, you're not trying to, connect with, 5 different people doing Zoom meetings all day and turning, assignments in on the computer and all that. There's face to face between you and your child. And if they're going to a tutor or they have classes they're going to, there's face to face with their teacher. There's even interaction with each other because like in my family, I combine a lot of subjects. So we're doing them
Mm-hmm.
all together. We're
Mm-hmm.
all doing history together. We're all doing literature together.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot less, there's more connection and less, of this fragmented kind of learning. And then lastly, I would say regular homeschooling, one of my favorite parts is that you have the freedom to go out and take a field trip every week, for
Mm-hmm.
example, or do things,
Mm-hmm.
which being home all the time, that we've been limited in that. And I think when you learn outside of the classroom, whether it's your classroom at school or classroom is your home, but when you learn outside the walls of a room, it makes learning come to life in a new way. And
Totally.
so having the freedom to be able to do that is, I think, one of the huge pluses of homeschooling. And that's
Yeah.
not happening as much right now.
No, not as much. We were very fortunate in that our district gave the kids Wednesdays off from
Oh,
the distance
nice.
learning. And it was really cool to have one day a week in the middle of the week we'd go to the beach or, just kind of be able to be
Yeah,
together and get out. And that's not something we could have done before. It was
that
kind of
is great.
nice. Yeah.
Wow, I love that
I
they did
loved it
that.
too.
That's,
Yeah.
I feel like that is really, really wise.
Yeah.
Everybody needs a break.
I thought so too. I mean, and they were, it was a day for them to do individual learning,
Right.
but I liked that they could, they could read or they could, take a notebook to the beach or, we
Yeah.
could kind of get out and
Right.
not be sitting on the computer because I think I'm experiencing Zoom fatigue myself. I mean,
Yes.
it's just,
Especially launching a book and doing a
oh
lot
my
of these,
gosh,
right?
totally, that and, trying to stay connected with friends and,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, I know by the end of the day, I'm like, I don't want to look at a screen. I don't want to look at the internet at all. So talk to me about, because, your kids are in similar ages to mine. And I know people might be listening to this conversation thinking my teenagers are just completely uninterested in connecting with
Yeah.
me. Tweens and teens, they're in that age where they're kind of individuating and they think everything we do is lame. And,
Right.
do you have advice for parents on how to kind of push in with kids at the age that are pushing away?
Well, I think that it's actually similar to what we were talking about as far as like what society and culture tells us about our kids'
Mm-hmm.
schedules. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
think society and culture says your kids don't want to be with you as soon as they become teenagers. They want space, they need space. And I just don't think that that, that, that has to be true.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there is a natural distance that occurs because they are becoming more independent, and as it should be, but they're also they actually are craving connection with us and time with us. They might not know how to say it, they might not know how to ask for it, they might even be embarrassed to ask for it, because they've heard as well the same messages we have. Oh, teenagers, don't want to be with adults, they're lame or whatever. And so of course, it's easy if you've started at the beginning creating a culture in your family where you have dedicated family time, um, whether it's through adventuring, like I talk about in my book, or some other way, because that's the culture you've created and that's
Yeah.
expected. But if you're
Yeah.
starting later and
Mm-hmm.
your kid's 13 and you're like, okay, guess what? It's adventure time. They might be like, oh.
Right.
So you have to do a couple things. I think you have to be willing to push through a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of resistance on their
Yeah.
side, and trust your intuition as a parent that this is
Mm-hmm.
going to be good for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also have to make it appealing to them. So
Yes.
if you are presenting it like this has to happen,
Mm-hmm.
then it becomes almost punishment like.
Yeah.
Or if you're doing things that you haven't consulted with them, they're not interested, you haven't made them part of the process,
Yeah.
then how is that enticing? It's
Totally.
not. You have to make it be, try to embrace their vision,
Yeah.
and even if you're bringing friends along, to just get the ball rolling so that it
Mm-hmm.
feels like, okay, I really want to hike with you, but how about we bring your friend too? And then
Yeah.
that just you're sort of paving the way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is so important to kind of meet them where they are and take into account like one of the things that I've been trying with my kids is because we have more time is like okay, we're gonna do a hike once a week, but I want you guys to search and figure out where we go hike. So like giving
Right.
them some ownership of like okay, you're picking the place.
Right.
And then like my boys are super into skateboarding, which I don't do. But if I can pack a little stop off at a skate park
Mm-hmm.
to wherever we're going, right?
Right.
Like we went to the Salton Sea and we listened to a podcast about how it got that way. But on the way back from the Salton Sea, we found a skate park. And like that little thing makes the whole day they're in. They're
Right.
in
I
because
love
there's a skate
that.
park coming up.
Right. That's great
Um,
because it shows that you are listening to them and you care about what matters to them. And
yeah,
that's like, who doesn't love that? Who doesn't love being known?
so true. Who doesn't love being known? And I think to your point, we do take this message from society that says our teens aren't interested in us. But I think, my stint as a therapist tells me everyone, no matter what their age, is interested in being known,
Mm-hmm.
is malleable and receptive to people wanting to truly know them.
Right.
Right?
Right. And if you think about it, like if we say, well, teenagers don't want to be with us, I recall from the time I was an early parent, in my early parenting days, being told again and again that I would love parenting until I had teenagers and it would be terrible. So I think the message is also out there that adults don't want to be with teenagers.
Yeah.
And they're not immune to hearing that.
Yeah.
So I think as parents, we need to make an effort to say, I want
Yeah.
to be with you. You are
That's
not
good.
annoying to me.
Yeah.
Even if you're an emotional roller coaster and we've got
Mm-hmm.
hormones up the yang yang around
Mm-hmm.
here, which we do, mine and
Totally.
theirs. But it's okay
Yeah.
because I still want to be with you.
Yes. I think that's so important. And I agree. I actually, I love parenting
Me
teenagers.
too.
This is my favorite. I
Yeah.
feel like they're these interesting people and I'm getting to see it's not just the care and feeding anymore. It's like I'm getting
Yes.
to know these fascinating people that I love, but also like.
Yeah.
And I tell my kids that all the time. I really like you guys. Like I like being around you guys. Um, and I think when they feel that and know that, that goes a long way,
It
right?
does. I think so too.
Yeah. Well, tell me what are some of your favorite connection points with your kids? Like even adventuring, like what does that look like if someone's going like, I don't know how to start?
Well, I think that number one, it's really important to recognize that you don't have to compare your adventures with other people's. We
Yeah.
live in such a society that, again, I'm like talking about society. I don't hate society; it just sounds like it. But we do like in the social media world, like we
Mm-hmm.
could look at the adventurous family, adventurous mom, and she's climbing Mount Everest with her kids and RVing to like,
Right.
Chile. And
Swimming with sharks.
yes, with like newborns.
Yes.
And we're like, I can't do that. So my
Yeah.
adventures don't count. And I think that it's important to recognize wherever you're at, like just start where you are
Hmm.
and don't compare yourself to other people.
Yeah, that's so good.
And then next, just if your kids are little, of course, they're going to be easier to please, and you can do things like, take them for a walk at a nature center and they feel like they're exploring the wilderness. If your kids are older, you need to find out the things that light them up, like your
Hmm.
example of where we're going to find a skate park to visit while we also go visit this other cool destination. That's such a great way to fill their hearts while you're pouring in.
Hmm.
Um, and also even filling your heart, which I think is important too. So for our family, we love hiking and we try to hike every week. My kids love hikes that are, have the opportunity to climb trees or go bouldering or, find a waterfall, something
Hmm.
that's more exciting than a walk in a nature center.
Yeah.
So that's one of my favorite ways to connect because when you're walking together, there's not the awkwardness of face to face,
Hmm.
like let's sit down and have a serious
Right.
conversation, which makes people clam up.
Yes.
But it sometimes a deep conversation can happen
Yeah.
because it's comfortable and you're shoulder to shoulder, but sometimes it doesn't, and you're just enjoying the experience of being together out in nature, which is really peaceful and filling.
Yeah.
So that's one of my, like, that hands down, that's one of my favorite ways for us to connect. And it also is good for everybody. Like
Hmm.
my youngest and oldest, everybody can do the activity together, which
Hmm.
when you have a bigger family is really nice.
Yes, it is nice. It is nice and not always easy to find it something that, appeases a teenager and then, a kid who's still in elementary school,
Right.
say. Yeah.
Right.
Hiking is like the great equalizer, isn't it?
It is. And I think too, like, you can, like, I remember people saying, like, especially my mom, like, choose an exercise that you can do when you're older. And it's like, try
Yeah,
swimming. And, but I feel like hiking is that way. Like, I think, well, I could hike with my kids when they're adults and,
totally.
I can hike with my grandkids. So if I instill a love of being outdoors
Hmm.
and adventure, like, we can take it to the next level. Like they can go on a backpacking trip and they can do the John Muir Trail and hike for days and days.
Hmm.
Or we could just do, a 3 mile hike nearby.
Yeah.
Either way, it's filling us up. It's providing a place to connect, but it can be built upon, which that's
Yeah.
what we want.
I love that. And I think, it's like anything, if you do it enough, it becomes a habit, it becomes
Mm-hmm.
a norm. And I think if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that our family norms are malleable. I mean, I
Yes.
never would have thought 2 months ago that our family would end the day with everyone just kind of sitting on the couch talking.
Yeah.
But that's how it's ended. That became a new norm for us in the middle of things. And so I think it's never too late to think like I'm going to shift our family culture a little bit.
Right. Yeah, I've had the same thing. I mean, we read aloud and listen to audiobooks, and we have for literally years. But a lot of times by evening, I'm like kind of tapped out and I don't
Yeah.
want to talk to anybody anymore.
Yeah.
And so my husband has done the read aloud, but
Yeah.
with the kids, and it'd be like their thing. But through the pandemic, I'd gotten a new book, and I thought I really want to share this with everyone. So the rest of the family, they're all artists. I'm not. Um, and so they were all sitting around the table drawing together, which they love to do, and I was reading aloud, and it created this. It's
Oh,
kind of
I
created
love that.
a new way of doing something that we already did, but
Yeah.
just
I
changing
love
it up a
that.
little, and it's been really nice.
Yeah. One thing we started when the pandemic started too, we did it a little bit before, but we have these like table topics. It's a little cube of
Mm,
questions, and
yes.
you can buy them on Amazon or whatever. And we would do it maybe once a month. But when the pandemic started, we started doing it at every meal. And so at dinner, we would just end up sitting there for a long time. And, it's funny you said, that everyone is receptive to, wanting to be known.
Hmm.
Um, and I think everyone is also receptive of talking about themselves. Like everyone
Yeah,
loves to talk about themselves
right.
at the end of
You're
the
right.
day.
You're totally right.
And so questions that give kids an opportunity to talk about themselves, like what are your goals? What are your dreams? My kids have really taken to that. And so that's become a new little practice in our house too, is just sitting a little longer at the dinner table and asking
Yeah.
each other questions.
And I think giving them like the space to like sort of think about those things that they might not even normally be thinking about,
Yeah.
and making it like we're all going to listen to you
Yeah. Yeah.
and hear your thoughts about
Yes.
ABC.
Yeah.
That's really fun. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. My last question for you is like, how do you create a safe space for kids to talk to you about the hard stuff? Like how do you make it so that your kids can, and you mentioned one way I think, which is, you know, like a hike is such a great way of like
Mm-hmm.
getting a kid to talk where it doesn't feel intense. But do you have any other practices or advice for um, getting your kid, making yourself a place where your kids can come when they have a topic that maybe otherwise teens would think, I'm not going to go there with my mom
Right.
or with my parents?
Well, this is funny to me because I'm kind of notorious in our family for bringing up typically awkward topics
Yeah.
and things. But I think the first step is to just you're the one as the parent who opens the door
Mm-hmm.
and just brings up these topics to talk about. And that shows them, even if they feel embarrassed when you bring it up,
Mm-hmm.
it shows them that you're not afraid to talk about this
Yes.
stuff. So, for
Yes.
example, we're driving and there's a billboard that's for, you know, a, uh, a strip club or a
Yeah.
gentleman's club or
Uh-huh.
Chavez bar, whatever. And I'll be like, wow, that's really clever marketing, because there's one sign in particular, and the words don't spell sex, but the way they've designed it is it looks exactly like sex. And so you can't not look at it.
Yeah.
And so we're just driving by. I was like, wow, that is really clever marketing. What does that word say? And like they're kind of like a little uncomfortable, but then they're like, well, I guess it's okay to talk about it. And so a whole conversation ensues.
Yeah.
And so as the parent, if you just something comes up on TV that you're watching or in a movie, instead of just like fast forwarding it or
Mm-hmm.
skipping it or we'll talk about it later, like if
Mm-hmm.
you don't shut them down, in fact, if you even open the doors and
Mm-hmm.
start the conversation, it shows them you're open,
Yeah.
and they will slowly start to realize like, oh, it's okay, I don't have to be afraid. They might, like I said, in my family, they sometimes are like, oh my gosh, there goes mom again.
Mine too.
But at the same time, they know it's safe, right? Like,
Yes.
I listen to podcasts and they'll walk in and they're like, one of my sons goes, you can't even come in the house for 5 seconds without hearing about sex or porn from mom's podcast. I'm like, well, sorry. That's
But
the world you're living in.
at least they know that my mom can say those words and she can handle those
Mm-hmm.
topics. And I think that's huge too, because I grew up in a culture where if there was a sex scene on television, I mean, my parents would quickly fast forward it and just be like, "Oh, that's so inappropriate."
Right.
And then what I learned is, like, I can't talk to my parents about sex. I guess sex is bad. I mean, so
Yes.
many messages around that
I,
versus, what
yeah.
I'm trying to do, which is more like, okay, let's talk about this. Well, this couple just went into a storeroom and had sex on this superhero show you're watching. Like, let's talk about that. Like,
Right.
let's talk about,
Yeah, I agree. Is
yeah,
that real? Was
yeah,
it, how did, there's so much that you can say there instead of just clamming up,
yeah,
which insinuates all the things that you said. This is bad.
yeah,
This is shameful. It's embarrassing.
mm-hmm,
There's no openness. And
yeah,
I always think I don't want my kid to go to Google to get the
yes,
answers for
yes,
anything related to sex and sexuality,
totally.
because there's a lot of misinformation and even
Yep.
damaging information
Oh,
out there.
yeah.
So I'm going to be awkward. I'm going to be open.
Yep.
And I think if you can just create regular places where you connect with your kids, then it does allow for conversation to happen more easily,
Yes.
because they just have time and space to feel like you're available and you'll listen.
Yeah. I love it. Well, where can people find you online?
Okay, so I am most active on Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
and my Instagram is Ma and Pa Modern, which connects to my love of mid-century modern design, not
Love it.
because I'm like Ma Ingalls in the modern age, not at all. That's got to clarify that. I'm not a homesteader. And you can also just look for Greta Eskridge and find me that way too. I have website, gretaeskridge.com, and my book will be out in July, and pre-orders are happening soon, and you'll just find me then on Amazon, which is crazy.
Awesome. Which is so crazy. You're on Amazon. Isn't that such a weird feeling? It's
Yes.
very surreal, right? As a
Yeah.
first time author to be like, my
Yes.
name is on Amazon.
It's kind of like I celebrate every little victory. It's like, oh my gosh, look what just happened. I mean, I have
Totally.
to try to keep it to myself because not everybody is just excited. But it's
I
like when your
know.
baby takes their first steps, like
It
this is our
is.
baby,
It
right?
is. It absolutely is. I know. I was very excited the day it went up on Target website. Like, I was like, it's Target.
Yes. Well, that's
I
a big deal, sister.
love Target. So fun. Well, it was so great to chat with you. Thank you
It's
so
good to talk
much.
to you too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.